Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here. I hope you had a great long weekend. Now, if you've watched any of the videos here on the channel, you'll know that we are waiting for April 19th to get a whole bunch of new information. This is when the new Canadian budget will be finally presented in the House of Commons. And this is going to give us answers on questions like, will we have a continuation of benefits that have been made? Are we going to see this transitioned into UBI? Will the government step in to control the housing market in the situation that's going on there in Canada right now? That's when we're going to get all of our answers. But there was a new interview that might give us hints, especially on the benefits front, as to what the Canadian government is going to do inside of this budget. Let me show you exactly what I mean inside this interview. We're going to talk about it, and I'm going to give you a better idea of what this means for you going forward. But before we do, make sure to check out the links in the description where you can open up your own investment accounts and start taking your wealth into your own hands. It's clearer and clearer that the only person we can rely on for our financial future is ourselves, so I'd recommend doing that. And okay, let's get into this interview. Now, this is from the show Rosemary Barton Live, and in this video, she's interviewing Duclos, who is the president of the Treasury Board here in Canada. He has a lot of responsibilities for making sure that the government is able to fiscally operate. So it's interesting to hear what he has to say here about whether or not benefits will be continued inside of this new budget, which we're waiting again to see on April 19th. Let's listen in.
The Prime Minister said again this week that, he's there to offer support, economic support to provinces and to Canadians through this third wave. I wonder if there is a discussion already about potentially extending EI benefits beyond what are there, extending the wage subsidy, extending any of those programs, because we are in a third wave and this is going on perhaps longer than we thought.
That's an interesting question to bring up, and I believe that she does that because the government has said here countless times that they're going to make these decisions on whether or not programs will be extended, whether or not things like the CRB, whether or not there's going to be an extension there past the extension that's already taking us till the end of June. Same with EI, same with the business supports, Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the CEBA loan. Are these programs going to continue? Now, the federal government has largely said we're going to look at the job numbers, we're going to look at the stats as we get closer to that, and we're going to make that decision moving forward. So she's saying, hey, we're kind of seeing third lockdowns coming into effect. Ontario, BC, they're struggling right now. Same with many places in Quebec. That means the jobs numbers are likely not going to be as great. So will we continue to see these benefits be extended into the future? Now let's hear what he has to say in response.
Well, that's an excellent question. And the Prime Minister, the Minister of Freeland, the Minister of Finance have always said, and I'm there to support that again, that we will be there for as long as it takes and for how much as it takes.
So him saying we'll be there for as long as it takes, for as much as it takes, I believe this is like the liberal talking point that they're always saying in response to things, and it gives them a lot of wiggle room into what they're actually going to do, because they say we'll be there for as long as it takes and we'll do as much as it takes. We'll spend any amount of money to get Canadians through this pandemic, but it doesn't really give any details on how this is going to work. So it's an easy way for them to say, hey, we're not going to give you any more information, but we'll be here to support you and have your back. So it's a little bit less detailed than I would like.
Obviously, we are facing a third wave, which was both unexpected and certainly not the outcome we were hoping for at this time of the year. So I think we all look forward to seeing the budget on the 19th of April. But the budget will do what I've just said, and Minister Freeland and Prime Minister Trudeau have said, that is, we will be there for Canadians for how long it takes to exit out of this health crisis and therefore exit out of the economic crisis.
I'm glad you brought.
He says very clearly there, that's what this budget is going to do. It's going to be there for Canadians, but in what way, we don't know, and we don't have that clarity. But based on what he's saying, it really sounds like he's trying to set us up, and same with what the other politicians have been saying in the Liberal Party, set us up for a budget that will have a lot of spending inside of it, and a lot of program extension, and a lot of money spent to get us through, at least economically, through to the end of the pandemic. Now, if you've watched any of these videos that I've made on the channel in the past couple of weeks, you'll know how big of a deal it is on April 19th that they are releasing this budget. But there's also another important date that's coming up on this weekend, actually, and that is the Liberal National Convention. It's their policy convention. You'll know the Conservatives had theirs a little while ago, where they did all those voting on different policies, climate change policies that made headlines. But now the Liberals are going to have theirs on the weekend, and it seems like there's a lot of support for new policies to be implemented into the Liberal platform. Now, whether or not we see the results of that actually materialize materialize in the budget remains to be seen. It could be that there's not enough runway for them to actually make changes inside of the budget based off of these new decisions on UBI, on programs in the direction that the Liberal Party wants to go. But we'll have to wait again until we see that budget to know exactly how they're going to implement these programs, extensions, whether or not they're going to actually include a national child care like they've been calling for so that women can get back into the workforce. That's something that Liberals have promised before, and now they're kind of expected to include inside of this budget. Remember, Chrystia Freeland said that she's open to spending up to $100 billion on getting us out of this economic crisis, which is largely what he's pointing towards here. But I also want to show you a little bit more from this interview, because I believe that she asks a question here about the budget and how the fact that the parliamentary budget officer, who is sort of supposed to do retrospective looks at the government's finances and saying like, hey, are we headed down an appropriate path? That's in basic terms what their job is. They recently came out and said, hey, maybe this additional spending inside of the upcoming budget isn't necessary because we've had some solid economic numbers. Let's see what he has to say in response.
I'm glad you brought up the budget, because that lets me get one more question in on the budget, and I'll have you put on your Treasury Board hat for that part. The parliamentary budget officer said last week that the economy is actually doing a little better than we expected. The deficit's still going to be very, very big, more than $300 billion, but that after the crisis is over, the federal finances are going to be sustainable in the long run. I wonder if that begs the question then, Minister, about whether the stimulus package that Minister Freeland has talked about between $70 and $100 billion needs to be that big. Is there any thought about whether that much needs to be spent, given that the economy is perhaps going to recover better on its own than we expected?
Very good. Well, first, it's obviously to Minister Freeland that the answer will come from. But second, if I may answer from an economist perspective, one of the lessons that we've learned from previous recessions and depressions is that there has been a tendency for governments to underinvest as we exit of an economic crisis. That is a very unfortunate outcome, because it means that we are then faced with higher unemployment, lower growth, lower living standards for Canadians, and therefore lower taxes and greater deficits over the longer term. So there is, unfortunately, as for the health crisis, a tendency to underreact, to be underprepared, and to be underreactive, as I just said, to the challenges posed either by the health or the economic crisis. So it's better to invest more and to exit of the crisis faster and stronger than to underinvest and then to be faced with a lower level of growth, a higher level of unemployment, and therefore more challenges in terms of the fiscal framework.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there. We covered a lot of ground.
A little bit. Let's break that down. All right, so essentially what he's saying here is in response to this new report that came out, saying maybe we don't need to spend all this extra money on the economy to get us through to the end of the pandemic. And what his response to that is essentially, we've seen in the past that when you pull away stimulus too quickly, that it has negative consequences on the economy. It can have longer timelines of how the unemployment rate will improve. It could expand that. So he's saying it's better for us to just spend money now, as opposed to sort of trying to take this away too soon. And the Liberals have been saying this since like halfway through our current time, since the beginning of the pandemic. They've been saying, hey, we're not going to look at taking these benefits and these programs away yet, because that could do even worse economic damage than if we were to leave them in slightly too long. So again, he's responding with this, and this could hint that the programs and the different plans and the spending that we can see here in the Canadian government could be continuing in the long term, and that we should be getting ourselves ready for April 19th, when we're likely to see a big amount of spending included in that federal budget. But of course, we're just looking towards this April 19th date where we're likely to get a lot of these answers. Are benefit programs going to be extended? Are they going to be sort of weaned off and sort of slowed down very soon? Is that what's going to happen? Are we going to see this transition into some sort of UBI or basic income? A lot of people are hoping to see this included in the budget and see a firm stance taken by the Liberals here, who haven't really been too outspoken about whether or not they would be in support of this policy in the long term. Again, we're going to find out a little bit about that on this week. weekend when the Liberal government actually votes on their future policies at their national convention. We're also going to see things like, will the government intervene in the current housing market that seems to be absolutely going through the roof, largely due to this increased amount of money added to the system as the Bank of Canada has been buying billions and billions of dollars of Canadian bonds every single week. We're expecting information on how the government's going to support students, how they're going to support seniors, how they're going to support new parents, whether or not there will be an increase to the Canada Child Benefit. All of these points and all these different groups are going to be affected by this budget release on April 19th. So mark your calendar. Of course, we're going to do a live stream of that on the day of. So keep your eyes peeled on this channel so you can make sure you get that information as quickly as possible. But I'm really curious about what you think of all this. What do you think of this interview that I showed you today? Do you think it's wise for Canada to overspend right now with the fear of potentially taking away these benefits too soon and the economic impact that could have? Or do you think it would be better to sort of slow down and pare down our spending right now to make sure that we're not increasing the huge amount of debt that Canada is currently in? It's a complex situation and I don't personally have the answers, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. And of course, check out the links in the description where you can open up your own investing accounts and take your wealth into your own hands. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to keep supporting Canadian content just like this. And with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. This channel is supported by viewers like you. Thanks, channel members.